Okay, the next video phase we've got to do is the fight phase. This is probably not the last video. I think I'm just going to do another video on terrain, on defensible terrain after this, but then we'll be finished. The fight phase takes place after the charge phase, and first thing you need to do is choose what units are going to fight. Now the player with the priority chooses which order all the fights take place in. So for the first fight he'll choose, say in this example here, he'll choose combat 1, and then when that's resolved he'll say, oh, I'll do combat 2, and then combat 3. So the non-priority player doesn't get to choose which combats are actually resolved in whatever order. The exception to that would be using heroic points, but we won't really go into, we won't be going into that at the moment. Just look at the video on heroes if you want to do that. Next thing you do is determine the striking order. So when there's a particular combat, certain types of units strike first. So monsters, including flying monsters, strike first, then cavalry, and finally infantry. Okay, warriors of the same type always strike simultaneously. So if you strike first, obviously you can inflict casualties before the enemy can even respond. So when they respond, it will be the number of units minus the casualties already inflicted by the first strike. You have to calculate the number of dice rolled in a fight. This is done by 3 things: the combined attack value of any of the companies fighting directly, any common modifiers for those companies, and the number of supporting attacks. Right, when it comes to fighting directly, this little diagram shows you the first one. All 3 companies of orcs will fight as they're all within base contact. So even that little sort of little itsy-witsy edge contact there counts you as being in contact. If you look at the one below that, only the middle 3 companies of orcs will fight because the others are not in base contact. Companies that are fighting directly strike blows equal to their full attack value. For example, if a company has 8 attack, it will roll 8 dice. Remember, a company that has suffered casualties will have fewer dice depending on the number of models it's lost. Now, combat modifiers, these basically, these are really important, and they affect the number of dice, etc., that units can throw in combat. First thing, charging infantry. We've got this little table here. Okay, I'll just focus away and read it. Charging infantry and monsters. The company charged this turn, you get +1 dice for each company. Cavalry charge, cavalry and flying monsters, the company charge this turn, you get +6 dice against things like infantry, etc. But if you fight against cavalry and flying monsters, you only get +2 dice. Battle skill, the company with the highest fight value that's in your profile, you get 1 dice. Each company gets 1 dice per point of difference. Fighting to a flank, a company that's been charged in the flank by an enemy formation gets -3 dice to a minimum of 1. A company's been charged in the rear by an enemy is -5 dice to a minimum of 1. A company which is disordered, the company's total number of dice is reduced to 1. That penalty overrides all others. So you could be disordered and fighting to the flank, and even though you got -1 dice, you'd be reduced to 1 because you're disordered. Unstoppable charges, that's when a formation rolled a That's a formation roll, the 6 for its charge value. It gives you plus D3 dice to each company. Next thing we're going to look at is the supporting attacks. Now, supporting attacks is where the actual company, it's in base contact with another company that is from the same formation that's actually in contact with the enemy. And you see the example here, there are 3 direct on the good side and 3 direct on the orc side. Now notice the supports for the good side are the 2 second rank, and the supports for the bad guys are the 2 second ranks plus this other unit that isn't in base contact with the actual attacking good guys, but it is actually in base contact with a unit that is, well, I say unit, a company that is engaged directly. Right, all supporting companies, a bit like within shooting, they all contribute 1 extra dice each. Next thing you do is roll to hit. It uses the same process as shooting. You cross-reference the strength of the attacking force against the defense, and this resolves to a number, and that's the number on a d6. You've got to roll equal to or higher than to actually hit your target. Same rules with things like 6-4. It means you've got to throw a 6 and then you've got to throw a 4 or more on the second dice. You're removing casualties. Casualties must be removed from depleted companies first. You must remove casualties from full strength units that's in base contact with the enemy, taking from the rear most companies where possible. Right, just let me check that. It does actually clarify it here. It says casualties are removed from companies in the following orders: a depleted company in the formation, an undepleted company in the rear rank that's not in base contact with the enemy if possible, an undepleted company in the rear rank if possible that is in contact with fewer enemies than any other undepleted company in the rear rank. So assume if everybody's actually in direct contact, you'll just take it from the side the side companies or the only company present. Don't forget that if an enemy has a resilience score of more than 1, you need to inflict 2 hits to actually remove a single model, and that applies to the Rohan cavalry over here. Now, stranded units, occasionally a situation can arise where 1 or more companies in formation are no longer in base contact with the enemy when their turn comes to strike. When this happens, those companies simply cannot fight directly. They must make supporting attacks. There's an example here. This is a really good manual, by the way, and you can download it for free because you can't buy this manual anywhere. You'd have to either get it on eBay. If you wanted to buy it, you'd have to buy it on eBay, but you can't buy it legitimately through Games Workshop. So I don't think there'd be any problem with me saying you can just look on the internet and you can find a copy. Okay, this example number 1, the enter struck first, causing enough casualties to remove the depleted company of orcs on the left. Okay, right, so the second, the warriors of Rohan fight after the end and now left out of contact with the orc warriors. The Rohan player then immediately repositions his formation so it's in base contact once more. Okay, that's interesting. But with that diagram, that explains it really clearly. So in other words, it's a bit like pivoting forces. You're actually moving forces back into base contact because you casualties have actually stopped you from being in base contact. Okay, next thing we look at, you determine the victor of the fight. Just go away from the manual for a minute. So the winner of the fight is the one who's inflicted the most casualties. That's the most casualties, not hits. Casualties is a model that's been removed. Okay, that's important. Another for right. No, I don't need. I won't go into that. Right, the loser must test for panic. Okay. When a formation loses this is a formation loses a fight, confusion and panic sets in, and individual warriors lose heart. Okay, so what you do is there's a little table here again. You roll a d6, and you can. I'll just summarise as like onset of dismay, disordered, and steadfast. Okay, let me just summarise this. So if you throw a 1, onset of dismay, the formation must take a courage test, which is throw 2d6 and add your courage value. If it's equal to or greater than 10, you've passed. So if you fail the test, you become disordered. No, sorry. If the test is passed, the formation becomes disordered. If the test is failed and the formation still has more than 50% of the companies it started the game with, the formation immediately suffers a number of hits equal to the amount the test was failed by. Okay. If there are any companies left in the formation, they become disordered. If the test is failed and the formation has less than 50% or less of its companies that it started the game with, the entire formation is removed from play. Right, on a roll of D2 to 5, disordered, formation becomes disordered. It must take an immediate courage test and suffers a number of hits equal to the amount the test was failed by. The formation remains disordered until it passes a courage test at the start of its move. Okay. If you roll a 6, steadfast, the formation holds fast and suffers no ill effects. In the event of a draw, neither side tests for panic. Okay, that's important. Right. This next bit, earth-shaking charge. This is really interesting. So if cavalry excel in shattering formations, okay, if a cavalry formation charges and victorious in a fight, its controlling player rolls a d6 to determine if the charge has sufficient momentum to follow up. On a score of 6, the cavalry may immediately charge and fight again. It works the same way as a heroic fight. That's when a hero uses a might point to influence the fight. Formation can only benefit from a single earth-shaking charge in a single turn. Wow, that is good. Right, well, a couple of little other points. Quite often you'll end up in combat with 2 or more formations from the same army. Multiple fights open the possibility of a formation being able to split its attacks between 2 or more enemy formations. This is acceptable provided you declare how the attacks are to be apportioned before any die are rolled. Otherwise you could be a bit naughty with that and cheat. The only exception there, Each company that is fighting directly must aim all its attacks against one target in base contact. Right, okay. Individual companies may not split their attacks between two or more different formations. So it's right, yeah. So you couldn't have 4 of your models on one company fighting one other formation and the other 4 fighting that another one. Okay, got that. In multiple fights, calculate the total casualties caused in the fight to determine which side is victorious. And it should be noted that each formation on the losing side rolls separately on the panic table. If we look at monsters, even though there are no monsters in this battle, we'll go over this a little bit. It's worth remembering that a monster cannot suffer casualties in the same way that infantry and cavalry do. It's either alive or it's dead. The monster will only ever test for panic if it's on the losing side in a multiple fight. Right, so they can be forced into a disordered state. That's it.